This video is sponsored by Game Toppers. Turn your own kitchen or dining room table into a premium portable game solution at a fraction of the cost. Hey everybody, welcome to Drive-Thru Review 780. Today we're going to talk about Crunch Time. And the full name of this game is Mike Fitzgerald's Basketball Highlights Crunch Time. So if you're familiar with baseball highlights and football highlights, also designed by Mike Fitzgerald, this is kind of the next game in that line set in the world of basketball. And what this is a 1 to 2 player game, and it's a card driven game. You'll be sort of managing, like the other highlights games, sort of the highlight reel of the sporting event that you're going to be involved with. So that doesn't really do it justice. So let's go down to the table. I'll show you how it works. I'll show you a little bit about the solo mode, and I'll talk about 2-player, of course. But then we'll come back here and I'll give you my thoughts. Okay, here you can see everything that you get in the game, and this is how the board's going to look at setup. So if you're the red player, which is kind of your point of view here, you'll be sitting on this side. Blue player will be sitting on that side. You can see we've got the hoop here in the middle. This is the score tracker. So as you score points, as the red player, it's going to start to pull that tracker this way. The blue player starts to score points, is going to go back that way. So if at the end of the 5 rounds, if the little ball marker here is on your side, then you're going to be the winner. If it's not, if it's in the dead center here, you will have actually a little bit of an overtime set of rules there, which is kind of fun. And you can see you've got 5 players in your different player colors here, blue players and then red players. And they're going to start around the key here, like so. Nobody's in the center of the key, nobody's out here at the 3-point line. And the play is going to be driven by these 2 decks of cards here. So you've got your shot cards and your star cards. So in a 2-player game, each player is going to get 7 cards dealt off of this big deck here. And that's all you're going to get. You're not going to draw any more cards out of that deck. So each player gets 7 cards. In a single player game, you get 5 cards. And what's going to be happening over the course of the round is you're going to be playing these cards and then moving your players around. So it's going to be played over 5 rounds, and that's going to be basically 2 turns of offense and defense. So I'll play around here. Maybe I'll play this card, move some players. Then the blue player will play their card here, move some players. So that'll be 1 whole round. And then we'll do that 4 more times. And then we'll see who has the most points there at the end. Now on your turn, when you're on offense, what you do is you play 1 or 2 cards. So again, there's 5 rounds. You'll have 7 cards. At some point during the first 4 rounds, you have to play 2 cards at once. And then in the last 5th and final round, you also are forced to play 2 cards. So anytime in those first 4 rounds, you can play 2 cards 1 time, and then always in the 5th round, you play 2 cards. Otherwise, you're going to play 1 card. Let's just do this random card I picked as an example. So I would play this card here. So I've got these 3 highlighted areas. You can see these are beyond the 3-point line here. And you can see these diamonds here in the middle. These are all worth 2 points, of course. And so what you're going to do here is you're going to play a card, and then you're going to not knock everything over here with my one hand. But you're going to play a card, and then as the offensive player, you can move 2 of your figures. So we're the red player here. We'll play this down. 2 of your figures up to 2 spaces each. So what you want to try to do is get them in this position here, because these are the scoring positions. Your figures in these other positions aren't going to score any points. So I'll play that card. Again, I can move 2 figures. So I'm going to move maybe this guy out here, and then this guy here out there. Those are my 2 figures. I moved them only 1 space each. I could have moved them, 2 more if I wanted to go 1-2 with this guy for some reason. I could have done that as well. But both these guys are currently in scoring position. Now the defensive player gets a chance to respond. They don't play any cards necessarily, but they do get a chance to move one of their players 1 space. They don't have to move anybody if they don't want, and you as offense don't have to move anybody. But what they're going to want to do here is move at least 1 defender out here. And so now if we resolve this game state like this, then only these spots will score, but this guy is defended, so he's going to be able to contest that shot. That's not going to happen. So this guy here is going to score 3 points, so we're going to move that there down 3 spaces. So that's a very simple version of a turn there. And again, what will happen is the blue player will go, they'll play a card, they'll be able to move 2 of their players up to 2 spaces each. You can respond by moving 1 of your players, and you go back and forth like that. Now again, you can also at some point, twice during the game, play 2 cards. When you play 2 cards that round, you don't move any extra players. You still only move 2 players as the offensive player, and the defensive player only moves 1. But you're going to have enabled a lot more scoring opportunities. So you can kind of start to see here how you get your hand of cards, and then you're trying to set up to that big play, that big momentum shifting turn. If you watch basketball at all, especially the NBA, you know that it's a game of runs, of momentum. So if a team gets out to a 20-point lead at the end of the first half, that's a huge deficit. So even if the other team plays even with them in the second half, they still have to make up that 20-point deficit. So you're trying to set up those big runs to sort of take advantage, sort of tactically, of, you know, how the other team can respond. Okay, so that's a simple thing there. Now, where it gets a little bit more interesting here is when you have these star cards. So you're going to start the game with one of these in your hand, and there's a way to acquire more over the course of the game. And these are cards that you can play on offense or defense. So if we had this set up like so, let's take this out of here. And for example, we had set this one up like so. We had played this card. So we can take a look at this board here. We're the red player. We want to get somebody out here in the 3-point line and then somebody in here for these places here. And so what we'll kind of do, we'll play this card here, and we know we have this shot card, or star card, in my hand. So we can move 2 players. So let's just try this. We can move this guy here, and we can send this guy back into the free throw line. And now you can see we've matched the criteria of these 2 spots. We didn't have anybody in this spot here, but we can also play a star card. So we can play that there, and you can play as many star cards as you want, as you have, as long as one of the spaces on the star card, and they're all one particular space here, as long as they match up with the shot card. So this spot is being used by the shot card, whereas this one here is being used by this spot. So if I had 2 of these that were the same, you can't reuse the same spot, but I could play both of these to try to score there and there. So if I play, let's say, this one and then these 2 star cards, then we would take a look here. Now after I played all the cards, then the defensive player can respond, so maybe he moves down here. And then what's going to happen is you're going to evaluate each of the cards. So first we're going to evaluate this card. Well, we can see we don't have anybody in this space or this space. We do have somebody in this space undefended. He's going to score as 2. But we're going to now look at the star cards. Star cards, they don't care about a defender because these are your superstars. They're going to score even if somebody's in their face. So you're also going to score this guy again for 2 points, and then also this guy. So in that total, we're going to net 6 points. But the defensive player also has an opportunity to play a star card. And so they could play this one. And again, it's the same rule where it has to be the spot that they use on their star card has to match something that was set up by the shot card. So in this case, the defender would have this card. And so even though you're technically on defense, you can still score this star card. So the defender would score 2. So instead of netting 6 points, we're only going to net 4 points from the red player in that case. So again, you can play as many star cards as you have, as long as they line up and match with that, and you can do that on offense or defense. Now, the way that you acquire new star cards, because remember you start the game with 1, is if you can maneuver the players so that they are completely filling up all of these things here. So if we had set this up here, you can see this one, we'd have a guy there, and let's say we had this guy here. So at the instant that I played this card first, because you always lead with the shot card, because I fulfilled this completely, this whole criteria, then at that point I can draw a star card. And if you had a turn where you played 2 shot cards, because remember you can do that twice during your game, then you can draw 1 star card for each of those if you completely matched up everything that was on both cards that you played. So that's how you get new cards. So you can see there's a little bit of opportunity here in terms of, like, where players are at, because you can only get to certain spots from other places on the court there, but then also trying to set up that turn so you can get multiple cards in play and multiple opportunities to score. And you just go back and forth like that for 5 rounds. If you go into overtime, you'll draw 3 fresh new cards and then 1 new star card. And I should say, at the end of the game, if you have star cards in your hand that you haven't played, those are worth 1 point each. And then you're going to score every turn to see, it's kind of like a sudden death overtime. So at the end of each turn, you're going to see who has the most points. And these star cards, if you don't use them, are worth 1 point every turn in that case. So the overtime basically give you 3 opportunities to win. If you have another overtime, At the end of that, you just do the same thing again. The main difference with the solo game is you're playing obviously against an opponent. They don't have a hand of cards. They will pretty much always have a star card up in play that you can see that's visible. And then you basically have to move players to that if it's valid. And then what you do is you'll flip up a shot card from the deck, and then you'll just pick up all their players and then just set them like so. So they'll have everybody in scoring position. And then you'll kind of go from there. And then if it doesn't capture all 5 players, which this doesn't, then you'll flip up star cards to move them so they will be, as long as the star card is in a spot where it's not depicted by there. So you basically set up all the AI's players in this formation and then draw a new star card for them, hopefully to try to score from their point of view. And it's a little bit random there, but you're still trying to set up your own hand and stuff like that and positioning. But what the AI player is doing is a little bit random, but that's how solo kind of works there. Okay, so that is crunch time. Let's just jump into my 3 pillars of review. First, we'll talk about play time. The box says 20 minutes. That's about right. I don't think it matters solo or 2-player. So it's a very quick, snappy game. Definitely doesn't overstay its welcome. Yeah, so I mean, this is accurate. Player count, I would say prefer it at 2-player, but the solo play is pretty good. I do kind of like it. Now, a little bit of a caveat there because my sport is basketball. So if you were not like into basketball, well, I'm not sure how much you would like the game anyway, but I don't know how much you would really like the solo game, if you didn't really like basketball. So basketball is my favorite thing, has been since I was little. And so it's still, it pulls me in for a lot of those reasons. So there's a little bit of, kind of built-in bias for the game in that way. But I will say, just jumping into kind of my final pillar, this is easily the best basketball tabletop game that I've played. It's a board game. It's kind of a card game too. So I almost want to call it a card game because it's so card driven. But I played a handful of other basketball games, and none of them have been good, frankly. And it's very tricky to, it's such a fast moving game. It should be the opposite of what you'd want in a board game. It's not, a plotting, methodical thing. Like baseball and football, there is like lots of downtime. Every time you throw a pitch, there's like a 2-minute wait. I'm exaggerating, but every time you run a play in football, there's 90 seconds before, or whatever, 45 seconds before the next play is due. This is a constant flowing game. There is no stopping really. And so that's very hard to depict in a board game or a card game. This does an excellent job of that. I think it really captures a little bit of what I talked about in the walkthrough, like the momentum of the game, especially in the NBA game. That can be very determined by momentum and runs. A team will go on a run, a 15-0 run, 16-4 run, that kind of thing. A lot of those games are really built on top of that idea where you find sort of an angle of your opponent and you exploit it until they make an adjustment or, the luck runs out or whatever. And that exists at all levels of the sport, but especially in the NBA. And I think this really captures that essence of the game where you can because what happens when you play the game is when you start off, it'd be kind of like, okay, I'm going to play this card, and then I can move these 2 guys and I get a couple of points or whatever. Because, it's pretty easy to kind of defend everybody. Everybody's really bunched up around the key at the beginning. But stuff starts to spread out. And if you look at your hand of cards and what you're trying to get set up is you're trying to set up that big turn where it's like, okay, this is the turn I want to play. Double cards, get these shot card or star cards out and really kind of rack up a lot of points so that it makes it hard for my opponent to overcome that deficit. And it does have a rule. It's not really clear if it's optional. I don't think it really is. You could play with it optional. But if you get a 15-point lead, you can see on the scorecard, then if you end up with a 15-point lead, I think at the start of your offensive turn, then basically it's like a mercy rule and you just win. So it's a blowout. So there is that option. I haven't seen that happen, but I've seen it get, kind of close down to that side. But you don't want to give up because I've seen like a good 10-point swing back the other direction, which is really cool. Even if it happens to you, because this is like this big dramatic thing. And I think, not the last time, but the time before last that I played it, it was like an 8 or 9 point lead going into like the final turn, I think, if I remember right, and it swung it all the way back to a tie, and we had overtime. It was just tons of fun, really cool, like dramatic swings. And the game has got that right balance of those kind of fun, it's a little bit luck driven because you got the cards and you want to get the right star cards and all that stuff, and you're not sure what your opponent has, but it has a little bit of enough crunchy tacticalness to it to make it feel real puzzly, and it has a real fun, interesting, again, sort of melding with the theme of trying to exploit kind of the weak parts of the court and just really kind of try to drive it in. And yeah, so there might be turns where you kind of like when you move your defender, you may not actually move to defend. You might be like, I'm going to let them have their couple of points because I know if I leave these guys set up in a certain way, my next turn, I'm going to just move them out to the 3-point line. And they're like, what are you moving out there for? Because there's nobody around there. But you're like, no, I'm trying to run a fast break, right? Or I'm trying to, get a guy out on the wing or kind of exploit like a drive to the lane and, and kick kind of thing and that kind of stuff. So it's abstract, obviously, because it doesn't have all the movement of it, but it has sort of the planning part of that. And that's the interesting part of the game to me as somebody who really enjoys basketball is when you watch it, it seems like a lot of times they're like making stuff up as they go, especially in the NBA game, where college game's a little bit slower and more boring, frankly. They have more set plays and like methodical, like more of a coach-driven league where they're calling in plays all the time. And they do that in the NBA too, but a lot of times they will practice these kind of routines and these setups and these positions so that they know like, oh, when this happens, to leak out over here or close the gap here or whatever. So that kind of stuff, because they're such a professional, high level there, that a lot of that planning and all that tactics come in, that's all happened before the game starts. And so a lot of that is kind of like the habit and the rote sort of practice and procedure and memorization of where to go and be where you're supposed to be when. And so this really kind of, teases at that part of the game. So you're kind of working that out. So it's almost like a little bit chess-like in a way, but it still has that kind of, wildness to it a little bit, the little bit of luck-driven sort of surprise kind of thing, where you're surprising somebody from your hand. So I can't recommend it enough. Again, if you don't like basketball, probably not watching still, but if you do, I couldn't recommend this enough. Really, really, I'm really happy because it was funny. I don't think this has anything to do with it, but I ran into Mike Fitzgerald probably four or 5 years ago at Board Game Geek Con. And I think they had just come out with the football one. And I don't know, he was telling me about it or whatever, because I really like the baseball one. I never played the football one. But, he came up to me and I've liked a couple of his other games too. And I was like, man, you got to make a basketball one. I don't want to hear about a football game. Make a basketball one, will you? And then, and he's like, we're working on it or something like that. I can't remember. This is a few years ago. So, I mean, obviously they were developing. I can imagine it took them quite a while because this is a very streamlined, pretty easy to teach design. It's pretty straightforward. You move the guys where the card shows and then, maybe they score points. That's the real basic idea of it, but there is some good layers here. So the fact that they could kind of distill this down, and because it only plays in 20 minutes, you're not like bored of it. It doesn't feel repetitive. Because you're in and you're out and you're done, and you've got a satisfying moment of gameplay. A lot of these other games, sports games, and I like the Blood Bowl and other games like that, they're up there like 45 minutes or like over an hour. And as a board game experience, that's fine, but this is trying to get at the sports experience as well. And you have to kind of let kind of the energy of that not be drug out too much, because nobody likes a 4-hour, a 4-hour baseball game's okay. It depends, but sometimes you can have these games that you watch and they're kind of boring and they're blowouts and they're not that exciting. So because it's just like compacted, it keeps that excitement and that energy within that little bottle. I think that's very important with this, especially when trying to emulate a sports game. You're not trying to emulate like this whole 48-minute thing, because there is, even though there's not like a lot of downtime in basketball, there are periods of the game that are kind of like lulls in the game, even in an energetic game like that. So again, that's the whole highlights mentality of extracting those highlights and those awesome plays. So anyway, I can't recommend it enough. Crunch Time, definitely take a look. Thanks.